let's move on to the women's division here. And of course, stay tuned. At the end, we will give our predictions for all three divisions. But right now, we're going to still run down team by team and let you know what to expect. We get the inside look at the rosters here. And Hannah's going to lead our way through the women's division, starting with telling us about the pools. These ones are named X and Y. Go ahead, Hannah.
Indeed, it would be a bit awkward to have two X chromosome name pools. So X and Y it is. So X, we've got Shout, Seagulls, Box, and 3FB. So looking at first at Shout, they've brought a mega roster as per usual. Lots and lots of players will be taking the field for them. So there might be a question regarding kind of that squad management piece. When we saw them play at Tom's, there are a couple of games where it took them a little bit of a while to put the pieces together. They weren't quite kind of, clicking and humming, but certainly a lot of new talent emerging through. Has anyone particularly caught either of your guys' eye from the Shout roster so far?
I really like Elena Bengi, and I know that Steph does as well.
Yeah, go ahead. I certainly do. I mean, I think she's one that over COVID, maybe we didn't watch her flourish through her, rookie into intermediary years. But whatever's happened, she is. I mean, she's a thrower, but she's a big body out there. She can win the pack grabs. She can do a bit of everything. But yeah, I would say that's certainly one to look out for. Otherwise, go ahead, Benj.
I was going to say, she might not be the finished article yet necessarily, but she's a player that's got all the tools that you would need to be, those standout player in any division.
Well, there are two sisters that are new to catching my eye, and that's both of the Capuchis. So you've got Chiara and Elisa Capucci. They were very, very handy, get the disc moving quite a lot. Usually seem to play on the same line as each other, which is quite nice, two siblings playing together. But yeah, there's a lot of emerging talent as well. And Bengi, yeah, absolutely. An absolute boss, sort of, both sides of the disc. And they will have a little sprinkling of the old guard. They've got Anna Cheshki coming along, as well as some Pancotti action for you, some Banfonte, and of course, only one Scazzieri sister, because the other one is overseas, currently trialing for some US action, which, we're seeing it a lot this season, players going across the pond to snag themselves some North American disc action, which, if anything, I have no problem with it, because they can come back. Because obviously, eventually they'll want to turn to the right side of the pond, as we see it, and obviously bring all that knowledge and experience with them. And then second place in Pool X is Seagulls, coming out of Germany. We've got two German teams this season, and of course, nods to the fact that we actually do have a full 8 teams at the Elite Invite, whereas last year it was just the 7. So Seagulls, you've got some of the big names that you would expect to have. You've got Pruns, who was more or less unstoppable back at EUCF. So it's certainly a player you want to have a plan of attack to shut down. There is no presence on either of the German rosters of, Kio Binovis, who picked up for the Seagulls at EUCF last season and was really dynamic in helping them in some of their games. But you've got Raffenberg, Olivieri. I could go through most of the Seagulls roster. They've got some pretty big wingspans, including, of course, Inga Narhus, who has quite a tall unit to try and shut down. But certainly a very good performance from them last season, which they'll be looking to build on this year. How about you guys?
Benji?
I always look out when Seagulls are playing for Masha, Maria Sevald, who I think is instrumental to what they do both on the field and helping to lead them off it as well. She's stepped up in numerous big games in the past. I still get frequent flashbacks to the EBUCC final back in 2018, that ridiculous Seagulls versus Cosmic Girls final, which I think I was just spent at the end of it. It was so goddamn good. So I always have a soft spot for Seagulls, I think, whenever they turn up at any tournament. And for them, as well as obviously, getting the EUCF bid, potentially, there's always bragging rights against their German rivals, I think, who are in the other pool.
Yeah, I knew you were going to bring up that beach final. It was one of the most cracking and a wonderful call on that final. And I'll leave it at just about that. The only one thing I'll say after we talked about Shout's enormous roster, only 15 on the Seagulls roster. So there'll be a bit the way we saw jinX doing it at Tom's tournament with a shorter set of legs, and hoping that there's enough quality in those 15 that can get them through a 3-day tournament and still find their way to the pointy end.
Well, this is the interesting thing, though. With Elite Invite, we've got a 3-day tournament, but it's still not that many games. They've not kind of, added random games through. You've got 8 teams in each division. So actually, I think we might see that kind of shorter leg roster working out as a good option for them.
Yeah, it's nowhere near as brutal as, say, Tom's tourney was, where you've got, 5 games a day or whatever, and you just really pack them in. This time you do get a bit of breathing room and a bit of downtime. Sorry to cut you off there, Hannah.
No, it's all right. It's a good point. And obviously, I think one of the things that's been apparent on the athlete Instagram game is how much people are now starting to take their recovery a bit more seriously. Ice baths, saunas, general kind of things to try and get your circulation going to kind of flush out all those toxins that build up over the course of a couple of games. So 3rd spot in Pool X, we have Box from Vienna. So lots of talent on this roster that were playing for the Austrian women's team, who kind of didn't really show us their best on their live stream game at Tom's tourney, but certainly some really talented people. We've still got Helen Terra this season, real big impact player, still living in Vienna. And of course, you've got a lot of homegrown talent, Bettina Schneidel, the ex-Eurostar, and of course, big shout out to our fellow commentator extraordinaire, Christina Obermeier. But I'm excited to get my first look really at kind of, Box Vienna in person. And certainly some people, I think Tabia Kramer had a really good Worlds campaign last season, really dynamic player. How about you two?
Go ahead, Benji.
Yeah, at their home tournament, Vienna Spring Break, they took a good second place behind East Block, but they were, I think, certainly a bit off it there in the final against East Block. And if you look back to Spring Invite in Padova, again, they had some games against the against the top competition, and it didn't always go brilliantly for them. They're a little bit up and down, and that might be who Box are at the moment. Like, they're good enough to go to those quarterfinals, but haven't yet shown the ability to maybe push through onto that next stage yet.
I think you're right there. They've got the potential for it, though, is what I really want to say here. They're the young up-and-comers, the Romina Seiler and Kati Ninaus. Those two really stood out at Elite Invite, and I do think at Vienna Spring Break. They played really well throughout that tournament. That final, I found the first couple points, 4 or 5 points, they were in it. There were long multi-turnover points that went against them, and there was like this early game gap that didn't seem fair. They were in a tight game, and I think if they can limit those, early deficits, they can hang with a lot of these teams. I think scheduling has them up against Shout first, so they'll get a nice test to kick things off.
And at the bottom of Pool X, we have 3SB, the now seen as potentially emerging this season, the other Czech team in the women's division, with East Block, of course, rising to ascendance. And so we don't have either of the Toshnelova sisters for the 3SB roster, who are probably some of the better well-known names, because they're both committed to the future of the population and the ultimate playing community. And congratulations to both of them on their sons. One has emerged, the other has not, but it's been great following sort of their training programs alongside their journey through to motherhood. But to talk about those players who will be featuring on the 3SB roster, I think it's really interesting to see a sort of a team emerging when they have lost big leadership, that kind of sometimes there is a discussion as a leader in your own head as to whether or not you are going to have a team that maybe is going to struggle without your presence on it, or if actually they're going to blossom and go to things that maybe wasn't your style. So we know that the Toshnelova sisters both like to shoot it, deep, big sort of huck game. And so, it's been really fun to see what 3SB can then put together as sort of an alternate strategy, what players will now rise to kind of, fill those big spots. What about you, Benji? What do you think?
It's, as you mentioned, it's interesting seeing players step up into new roles. They've got a larger roster than they did at Vienna Spring Break, so a few more bodies will certainly just maybe help them get over the hump in maybe some tighter games when you could tell by the end when teams were in the East Block game, for example, when East Block could continue to put fresh players out there. 3SB didn't quite have that luxury. They do still have a number of really impressive players. I was very impressed by the play of Saturia Sova last week at Vienna. Urshka Jakopin, the Slovenian, who kind of with the what's the word I'm looking for? Not collapse, that's a bit harsh. But now that Cosmo from Maribor aren't really a thing anymore, now playing a little bit north in the Czech Republic, she's a really useful piece to have as well. And I think with 3SB, you can predict how they're going to play. Yes, the Toshnerovas aren't there, but I think a lot of what they've preached will continue to be in effect and in presence there. You're going to get a number of multiple stifling zone looks. They're going to play quickly after the turn. They might be a little less happy than they were previously, but they're still more than happy to put it if the opportunities are available. Whatever happens, I just always enjoy watching 3SB, I think, not least because in terms of sartorial choices, they're quite unlike any other team out there.
I feel like you're turning into a Czech Ultimate fan, full stop, more and more every time you watch
I've been a Czech Ultimate fan for years, Steph. It's long gone at this point.
And it's very worthy. Anna Dvorakova was not playing in Vienna, one of their top players right now. She's on the roster. We hope to see her back. She can make a difference. I do think their offense is going to have to find some identity without their primary huckers. So that is something that I think they're working through, and we'll see if that does come to fruition. And finally, they've got 4 Teresas on the roster. So let's see if the Teresas can shine. There's enough of them. If Teresa plays well, that should be enough to maybe put them over the top and get them through to a higher qualifying quarter.
The power of Teresa. I also, to be fair, have to give massive creds to the stylistic choices of 3SB. They're some of the prettiest jerseys, I think, out on the stream. And
I really like that. Yeah. Like if you just arrive at a complex and you're like, I wonder who's playing. Like it doesn't take long to find where 3SB are. That's nice.
Pink flamingos.
Pretty.
I hope the inflatables in attendance. Yeah.
Okay, let's flip to the other side of the division, Hannah, in the next pool there.
Indeed. So in the top position for Pool Y, we have Yaka. So I think they'll probably be thinking in their minds, this is their pool, it's got the right letter and everything. You've got your usual crew of big stars. You've got Ali Mondiaux, Rasta. You've got a lot of the pickups from last season. So you've still got the likes of Maria Castillo. You have Rike Knudsen, who's going to be coming along, obviously recovered from injury, which has been brilliant to see her coming back. Esther van Dijk. It's more or less a very similar outfit to what we saw at the European Championship finals last season. Of course, they didn't have the best final when they were back in Kaole, but certainly it's going to be a pretty good squad. They're not the biggest, which I think, again, talking about the lower kind of demands on your playtime for the day could kind of work out well for them if they can kind of bring that cohesion and click all together. And yeah, there's a lot of really big talent. But, we'll see what happens this season. There have been kind of, murmurs about whether, the amount of kind of the weighting of the pickups. I think a lot of the top women's teams in the European division do have, those extra kind of bolsterings from afar. But certainly I think Yaka has the most kind of, of the ratio. They probably have the biggest kind of pull from other regions rather than just keeping it true red, white and blue with the French players.
Benji.
That's a really comprehensive summary. I don't know what else to say alongside that. Yeah, again, it's all about balancing the homegrown talent with the international additions. In the past, they've balanced that quite well. But as you said, in the past couple of years, they've just come unstuck right at the very end. So at what point do you change the mentality maybe of, okay, we're going to bring everyone in and maybe try and it feels harsh to say that they're not developing their own talent because They do have younger players coming through. I'm excited to see Babikian take a larger role this year, but it's going to be interesting. I'll put it that way. It always is interesting watching Yaka.
Yeah, looking forward to a lot of a couple little additions, some young talent on there. The one name on the roster that stood out to me was Olga Chinina. She's been a part of Yaka, of course, but was not there for at least the last season, maybe the last two. So she's back. I wonder if she'll be wearing her fluorescent colored sunglasses while she plays, as we've come accustomed to. And of course, a player I once coached, Natalia Bocanegra, who's now part of the internal Noisy-le-Sec training division. She's a very speedy player, originally from Colombia, who's coming along, who made a throwing error in Toms and heard about it from the commentary and is using that as fuel to get better. So she's definitely motivated to put some impact onto Yaka's performance this coming weekend.
Absolutely. It's a really interesting one with the, we talk about kind of the potential detriment to the younger developing players when you have those satellite individuals who come and kind of, play in your elite events with your kind of roster. But there's also, I think, one of the interesting things we don't talk about very often is that regular playtime squad cohesion, when you are able to train with that roster pretty much every week or so, if not multiple times a week, when you are a true Geo team and kind of go for that route. Maybe that's where, that advantage in those big games where it is super tight, maybe that kind of extra flow, that real sense of each other, those reps together, maybe that's the point where you end up with a bit more of an advantage on that side of things. But to look at our second spot in Pool B, that's going to be Bristol women, as we hear a bit of cat action, I think. Is that you, Benji?
Yeah, Lucy is being needy.
It's allowed. It's allowed. You've got quite the little roster. They've got to get their time with you. We all have a little bit of cat cam here. So looking at the women's roster for Bristol, it is a pretty handy squad. You've got a bit of more kind of experienced seasoned talent coming in. You've got Ange Wilkinson on the squad this year, and of course a bit of old school Bristol women. They've got Georgie Davin on the roster as well. Do both big throwing units, so they'll be able to really make the best of the young, speedy athletes that they have on their roster as well. You've got a couple of people who are representing for the GB programs this season at the EUC. And of course, Carla Link, again, talking about the throwing prowess of Bristol women. She's actually moved up to the north with her partner, but she is continuing to play for the Southwest team. So it'll be interesting to see how well integrated she is with a couple of their newer, younger faces. But yeah, it's pretty much sort of no huge change. You've got Ellie Payne coming across from Spice to join Bristol this season. So that must be, again, with a relocation. But generally speaking, I think they'll probably be quite a similar outfit to what we saw last season.
Yeah, last season was kind of a breakthrough campaign for them in the European stage because at home, obviously, they've been champions a few times, but picking up the bronze medal last year, I think was their first at EUCF as a program. So there's a lot for them to build on. You mentioned, of course, big players, A, coming back, and B, that are kind of continued through there, like Carla Link that's still there and kind of the older players coming back. But they've done a good job of developing young talent coming through over the past couple of seasons. It's been really exciting watching the development of players like Nat Oldfield and Lyndon Chang.
In fact, also, re-looking through my notes and also looking at the roster, you've also got Lulu Boyd who's come across. They're a real gun-heavy team. So, and we know you've got the legs and likes of, Durbin, Beeching et al. So it's going to be really fun, I think, to watch them. I think they could have some high-octane offense.
Bombs away, potentially.
Will be very interesting. Of course, the bronze medal last year, I think they broke the hearts of 3SB, who were primed for a deep run at EUCF last year, and Bristol got them in a heck of a quarterfinal to get them that much deeper. And of course, you guys are from the UK. You've got that one all worked out. So I'm going to leave it there. You guys have done a wonderful summary of Bristol, and we can keep moving through the division.
Sweet. So third spot in Pool B, sorry, not Pool B, Pool Y. Third spot in Pool Y. you've actually got the champions from the Elite Invite last season who've been knocked down the rankings due to their performance at EUCF, where, of course, it got knocked out by Seagulls in the German double-back derby that we had, I think, on Sunday. We had really fun times of two German derbies that we picked for our live stream games back in Carole. So jinX this season, we've already seen them. They are looking, again, relatively short roster, but they've had some pretty nice additions. They've got two Swedes from the gold medal European indoor winning sides that have got Oda Holmlong and Sara Jeklund. But they also, for this tournament, I hear have Greta Melliger, previously of Shout fame, who is a really talented player, moved over to the UK to do a PhD and has been snaffled up by jinX. I'm not sure exactly how that happened. I've asked the question, haven't quite got the intel for you. We'll also have Catalina Schulze, Hugo, and she's often known, who wasn't present for their Tom's Tourney outfit, coming across as well. But a really talented squad. Murray Muckstein, the captain of jinX, does a really good job sort of marshalling the offense really well. Really talented squad, sort of top to bottom. And I have a bit of a sneaky feeling they might be underseeded, but again, Pool Y is shaping up to be quite the tussle, I think.
Here's the thing: we say they're underseeded, but they didn't make the semi-finals at EUCF. So according to the most recent major tournament, you could argue they're seeded exactly where they should be. But it feels like a really tough 3 seed, doesn't it? Doesn't it feel tough?
Yeah. It's tricky because also it is the thing of certainly jinX at EUCF. One of the things that I think kind of maybe was to their final standing detriment was the fact that they just took players from Berlin. They sort of didn't try to snaffle anyone as extra legs from the rest of their roster. They were very short-staffed in Carole. So I think, here where they've got, those players, and it's not kind of just randomly picking them up. Those players are coming across and really trying to integrate themselves into the Berlin scene. Certainly, I know both the Swedes are hot on the Duolingo, trying to learn themselves some German so they can fully, integrate with their teammates. So yeah, I think certainly, like you say, it's a tricky third seed. How about you, Steph? What do you think?
Yeah, this jinX team impresses me. They impressed me at Tom's with the short roster. We have not said the name of the 17 shirt, which is, I think, my favorite player in Europe. But I mean, the heartbeat of that team, Anna Gerner, is the human highlight reel. She does it in every which sense. And Nesh Anik as well. You talked about marshaling the offense. I feel like she just sits behind the offense and makes sure and allows that marshaling to just go a bit more seamlessly. Always there for a reset. Always, she's got great pace but just hangs behind the disc and gives an immediate easy option all the time. But yeah, I like this jinX roster and I'm looking forward to seeing what they can do.
Yeah, they're a really difficult team to fluster. They very rarely look kind of, shaky and unstuck, even when they're kind of, absolutely gunning for it and gas from, they play with short rosters quite a lot. So at the bottom of Pool Y, we have Fabulous, Flying Angels Berlin's women's team. And it's been a bit of a rebuilding last season. Obviously, they didn't, quite get their way up the standings as we might have expected them to. You've got, of course, some, again, big household names. You've got Olivia Hauser, who is continuing to be the player she always has been, really big arm. Eugenia Harms really impressed me. Of course, a couple of these players are the silver medalists from the last European Ultimate Championships back in 2019. And then you've got Dace Cerule, the Latvian, who actually lives in Switzerland, and a couple of other people. Benji, what are you thinking of this team?
I always enjoy watching Dace Cerule play, and so I'm excited about that. There's a lot of players, actually, that I haven't had the chance to necessarily watch in person for a while. So I'm just because I think our schedule's never quite lined up at EUCF last year. So I feel a little bit less prepared to watch them than I do perhaps with some of the other teams here. But we've seen this in the past, that Fabulous have kind of, and I guess the Swiss women's teams in general, that every now and again, everything just kind of falls into place and it kind of takes you off guard. Like they've had it in the past where everything's broken right for them and they've won EUCF. Like, as you mentioned, 4 years ago at EUC, where there was a decent core of this side on the Swiss women's side. They lined up and went all the way to the final. Like, they get something cooking down there, and I'm not entirely sure how they do it, but every now and again, it all dovetails into place.
Yeah, I agree there. The potential exists most certainly. They had the Swiss national team played at Vienna spring break last week. That was their first kind of competitive hit out. They went to the semifinal and lost to eventual champions East Block in a very tight match. I saw Laura Niederhauser there. Another one when I go third after both of your excellent analysis, I just pick out my favorite players, I suppose. But Laura Niederhauser, one who can really put an imprint on the game. The double Hausers, as I've once called them, her and Olivia Hauser, when they get going together, again, if they get clicking, they can pull it off. I think being the lowest seed in this pool is appropriate. It is an appropriate seeding, but they are more than capable of swinging their way out of that.
Absolutely. And also, home advantage. They get to sleep in their own beds.
True.
I'm also excited to watch Hannah Egger play. One of the sort of, younger players in the team came up through the national Swiss women's team, and now, of course, will be representing in the seniors division at the EUC later this season. So, yeah, looking forward to seeing all of these teams play out here I say here, not physically yet, in Bern, although we will be soon. I'm very excited because I hear, fun fact, it's actually the home of the original Lindt Lindor chocolate factory.
Well, I'm gonna have to eat some of that.